This is Square Pizza, cooked up by SchermCo.
Hey everyone, it's Kelsey from SchermCo. Thanks for joining for another episode of the Square Pizza Pod. Today we had the joy of speaking with Munro Richardson, the Executive Director of Read Charlotte, a community initiative aimed at improving children's literacy from birth through third grade. Keep on listening to find out what Munro holds to be the perfect food. Spoiler, it's not pizza. And hear valuable lessons learned from Munro's work leading Read Charlotte and beyond.
All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Square Pizza Pod. Have Munro Richardson here from Read Charlotte. Munro, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
We're well. Thank you for taking time.
Happy to be here.
We like to start with a little bit of fun facts, and so at least going with Munro. Tell us about dumplings.
So I love dumplings, Chinese dumplings. I think they are the perfect food.
Okay.
You can have them boiled, steamed, fried. You can put all sorts of stuff in them, and then when you mix it with sauces, there's an infinite variety of dumplings, right? I think it's the perfect.
Is that
food.
the reason why so many varieties?
Yeah, so many
Like ways
varieties.
to enjoy it?
It's like the perfect little food from heaven.
From heaven.
Absolutely.
I feel like you're a fairly analytical guy, so to like double down on dumplings, you've probably thought about this.
Yeah,
like rubrics.
my chips are in the middle of the table on this one.
You feel good about it.
I feel good about
I
it.
have a follow-up question. Where are the best dumplings in Charlotte?
Yes.
My wife, our kitchen. My
Okay.
wife
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah.
Monroe giving relationship advice
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, my wife was born in Taiwan and immigrated to the States when she was 5, and we met in high school. And so we actually sometimes host dumpling parties at our house. So people come make dumplings, and then she'll fry them up and eat them. So it's good stuff.
I look forward to that invite, Monroe.
All
Thank
right,
you.
it's on the way.
What's the go-to dumpling if you had to choose one?
So I'm a vegetarian, so
Okay.
I love like chive dumplings. Those are pretty good. Stuff with tofu in it. But if you come over for dumplings, my wife will also make meat dumplings.
That's
She'll
nice.
separate them out for me. But
Pescatarian over here.
pescatarian,
So
yeah, I do. Yeah, pescatarian as well. So
I feel like it's snotty to introduce yourself
no,
as a
actually,
pescatarian.
yeah, it is. So I just go with vegetarian. But actually, Trader Joe's has some pretty good salmon dumplings. I found the other. They weren't bad.
Gonna
So you
add
do
that to the
fish?
list.
Yeah, I do fish.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of look the other way. on
Sure.
that one.
Just it's fair. I think another fun fact we read somewhere was around the movies you enjoy.
Yeah.
Tell the people about that.
Yeah, so during the daytime it's like super intellectual,
Right.
digging into data and research, and then
Yep.
in the evening it's like the reverse. So it's just like action movies, the least brainy movies you can imagine. So my wife loves documentaries, and she can't get me to watch them because I'm like, I've been thinking
Too
all
serious?
day long.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
too serious. Absolutely.
So obvious follow-up question: best action movie you've seen in the last 6 months, and then best of all time.
Oh,
So
wow.
double-decker question.
Wow, that's okay. So I'm just gonna go with what I saw. It's hard to go wrong with a Michael Mann, produced flick. I watched Six Underground on Netflix the other day.
No idea
It's
what you're talking about.
It's like an original. It's one of these Netflix originals. If you like,
Who's the main character?
I'm blanking on the guy's name. He's
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, Deadpool.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're getting served different recommendations on
Yeah.
Netflix.
Yeah, I think we are. But,
Algorithms that help.
Yeah, algorithms. So actually, it's total Michael Mann, so it's pretty good stuff. But I actually love sci-fi films.
Okay.
It's like my absolute favorite. This is a little more brainy, but I love Inception. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that.
Because you understood it. You're one of the 2% of people that understood
Not the
it.
first time. The first time I was like, "What in the world just happened here?"
Right.
But it kind of reminds me of the first time I watched The Matrix.
Yep.
And you're just like, I do not understand. Right, halfway through the movie, what's going on?
Yep.
So I love those kind of movies.
You seen Inception, Kelsey?
I have seen Inception. I've seen The Matrix, but I was young, so I feel like I need to like
You understood Inception?
I'll rewatch
Sure.
it.
Yeah. Okay. I think I only saw it once, but it was interesting.
Yeah.
Do I want to explain it right now?
Sure. Yeah. Go. I would love a 60-second breakdown of Inception. Okay, so when you are not eating dumplings in watching action movies, you're doing some pretty cool things in education, but in more broadly the social impact space in general. And so we're kind of going to, I think, get to some specific experiences, but from all the things you've done and what you're currently doing, can you boil down any 1 to 2 lessons?
So I'm a big fan of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger.
Yep.
I read all the shareholder letters. I've been to some of the meetings. Since I've moved to Charlotte, I've streamed the shareholder meetings. My wife and I are planning to go back to Omaha in May. So I was watching Charlie Munger, who's the vice chair of Berkshire Hathaway, speak recently. I think it was a few weeks ago, the Daily Journal annual shareholders meeting. And he had said something that just really grabbed me. He said, a problem thoroughly understood is half solved. And that just grabbed me. Now, he's paraphrasing someone else. I Googled it. But I mean, when you really think about it, I mean, your ability to thoroughly understand a problem really helps move you a long ways, because it helps you both to understand what do I move towards, but also what do I move away from. And you're going to encounter a lot of ideas. It's what I tell my team all the time. We're never going to starve for ideas. We're going to drown in them. Right. And so thoroughly understanding a problem gives you some sort of, it's like a light, right, to kind of guide you where to go and where to stay away from. And it's not thoroughly solved, but if you think about so many of the challenges we have, things that we want to solve, and if you were to ask yourself, how well do I really understand that? You'd have to be honest and say, I'm pretty ignorant about a lot of the dynamics. And so this idea of thoroughly understanding, you know, a problem thoroughly understood is half solved is pretty profound, and something I've been chewing on for the last few weeks.
What attracted you to Berkshire Hathaway?
So I love
you and your wife, I guess.
Yeah, so I love the way that Warren Buffett thinks. In fact, underneath like what we're doing, I think about Buffett all the time in terms of, you know, asset allocation, whether it's people, time, financial resources. How can we get the best social return on investment? Thinking about the partners and the interventions and strategies we're putting together. We talk about stacking and lining. It's just like this beautiful portfolio. And just like Buffett would like dig through annual reports of companies, I dig through journal articles. Like I've read hundreds since I've been here the last 5 years. And I'm looking for these gems that we just lovingly put together and stack and align to give kids the best chance of being able to read well by the end of 3rd grade.
That's incredible. While speaking of circling back to Netflix, just finished the Bill Gates documentary, and a lot of cool interviews with him and Buffett, just about their experiences and their foundations and how they landed on their foundations, but also their overlaps in their professional work as well.
Yeah, that was a pretty good documentary. I said I didn't like documentaries.
You just say, we got him. We got him.
Yeah, I had
it was a 3-parter too.
Yeah, it was a 3-parter. A friend of mine from DC told me I should check it out, so I listened to him. There's a kind of funny story about Buffett and Bill Gates. They were someplace, and somebody asked them, like, what's the secret to your success? And both of them said in unison, focus. Right? And I mean, I love that. I heard that years ago. Above my desk, I have like 4 or 5 quotes. They're all about saying no, right? Because it's like, you've got to focus.
Thank you for saying yes to the podcast.
Right. Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hope it's not a waste of time. Going back to the problem piece real quick, how does one like really understand a problem or like thoroughly understand it? And then when can you like begin to say, yes, it's now understood. Now we can move on.
So I'm going to go back to Buffett again. He has this notion called circle of competence, right? And so you're trying to develop like this area space that you like understand really well, and you're really clear about what's inside your circle of competence and what's outside of it. And the way I think about it is, if you have to ask if something's within your circle of competence, and you're probably outside of it, right? And so being really clear about what's in your circle of competence, but then also like strategically trying to grow that over time, right? And so I think a lot about how do we grow our circle of competence around particularly early literacy. And, you know, I came into this job 5 years ago not wanting to just replicate what other people had done in other places, because there's a lot of work that's been done to try to improve early literacy. But across the country, like, we haven't seen literacy rates improve. And so it's not to say that everything that had been done up to this point none of it was good or effective, but we had to try to figure out which pieces that we think would be most impactful.
Yep.
And so really trying to enlarge in our circle of competency around that was really important for us. And the question I had to be able to answer for myself, to be able to sleep well at night, and for the supporters is, what is it that we think we know that other people don't know that will actually give us a chance to do something extraordinary, which is get 80% plus of our third graders in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools reading proficiently. And if I couldn't answer that question for you, then I don't deserve to be sitting in this seat.
Good. Well, we're definitely going to get to that and more of that soon. I think Kelsey's got a good one that relates to that as well.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to the idea of focus.
Yeah.
So, and excuse me for skimming your resume. So you co-founded a college access program, helped found a school, co-founded a couple of tech startups connected to education, and most of that was in Kansas City.
Right.
So why read Charlotte? Why Charlotte? Why literacy?
Right. So I feel like I kind of came to literacy late. I spent 10 years at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation and somehow ended up as vice president of education when I was done. And, Kauffman was really an interesting organization. So we made grants, but if we couldn't find grantees to do the work we thought was important, we would start our own nonprofits, effectively, like wholly owned nonprofit corporations.
I don't think I know that.
And then we did research as well.
A lot of foundations don't do that, right?
That's very
pretty unique
typical
to them.
Yeah, so that kind of got into my DNA. And so that's how, when I was there, I was number 2 in starting a college access program back in 2003. Some years later, I was involved in leading school design, starting a charter school. In between, helped bring TFA and KIP and Expeditionary Learning Outward Bound and leading educators to Kansas City. And we often would tinker. So, maybe there was a way that you did something someplace else, but we were always trying to look at how could we improve it. And so I think those experiences came with me in terms of thinking about philanthropy and execution and startups. And then the other half of Kauffman is really about entrepreneurship, right? So entrepreneurship and education are the two jams for the Kauffman Foundation. So in many ways, I felt like I went to Kauffman University for 10 years, learning a lot about startups and entrepreneurship and innovation, and then brought that into my work afterwards after I left Kauffman. But I felt like during those 10 years, like I missed early literacy. Like it wasn't nowhere on my radar. And after I left Kauffman, the mayor of Kansas City asked me to join the board of Turn the Page Kansas City, which is our sister organization in Kansas City. And once I got on the board, I started reading up on it, on early literacy, and really feeling like I was kicking myself because I just was thinking back to the time when I was at Kauffman and I had opportunity influence where millions of dollars were going, and I just completely missed early literacy. So I felt like I was making up for that. But at the same time, I felt like I had learned some lessons, both looking back at my time at Kauffman, but then also, with co-founding 2 startups. I mean, when you've got to raise money, find customers, figure out how to pay the bills, pay your employees, and then also keep a roof over your head, that just kind of changes the way you see the world. And I brought all of that with me to Charlotte. And the reason I came to Charlotte was, so my first startup went well. It got bought out by a private equity firm. The second one didn't go so well. And so I realized that, we were ready for, my wife and I, for whatever. And thought we were going to move out to the Pacific Northwest, and I was looking at a job in Portland. But I saw this job posted in late 2014. Never thought I would get it. I was sure they would hire someone local. But through my...
Why local? Was just your hunch?
Yeah, it's just my hunch. I mean, if I were thinking back to my time in Kansas City, if I were going to do like a community-based effort, I'd probably hire someone local, right? Right? Makes sense. And so even when they invited me to come out, I thought I was the patsy. So it's just to say, you did a national search. We flew this guy in. So I thought,
a nice guy, yeah.
Nice guy, right? So I thought I was going to... fly out here, see Charlotte, and then go back. I was the most surprised person that they actually hired me. But I was really impressed by the folks out here. Like, they were all serious about improving literacy. And Charlotte, it's large enough to matter nationally, but it's small enough to get your arms around it.
Yeah, it's gettable.
We're not Chicago, LA, New York, right? But yet, nationally, Charlotte matters.
Yep.
And since I've been here, I've learned how much Charlotte has been looked to for a long time in other places as a model, certainly for a model previously for desegregation,
Yep.
but also for a lot of researchers. Charlotte is a very interesting place to be. So when we move the needle on literacy in Charlotte, it will have ripples not just for the rest of the state of North Carolina, not just for the region, the Southeast, which desperately needs improvement in early literacy, but has implications that are national.
I love that you said when we. It's going to happen.
Oh, there's no question.
Absolutely.
It's already happened. We just need to bring it forth for
Keep it
everyone
going.
else. Yes.
Yeah. Going back a little bit to what you said, the second startup didn't work so well. Can you tell people about that?
Yeah. So, there was a book that I read when I was at Kauffman. I think it was something like The Founder's Dilemma or something like that. And it was all about the problems that you have with other founders. And like, I knew all this stuff, but it was amazing to experience it in real time. And
So this was a partnership or co-founder?
yeah, so I had two co-founders, and it was amazing, and to just watch it slowly implode, and I mean, it was hard. I mean, it was really hard. Professionally, it was like one of the hardest times of my life.
Wow.
And I had raised money from friends, and it was really hard to have to go to them and say, "Hey, I'm sorry.
Not getting it
Like
back."
I threw everything at this and don't have anything more." But the biggest lesson that I took from that was the importance of teams, having the right people around you. And I actually had to have, it was a friend of mine who was president of the Hallmark Corporate Foundation at the time. And she was also on the Turn the Page KC board with me. And she just said, "Munro, you're really good at building teams. I mean, look at who's running the education department at Kauffman. You hired all them, right?" And it was just kind of the reminder that I needed. So when I came back out here in 2015, I had team heavily on my mind and like finding the right people, right?
Because you're still kind of, not maybe scarred's an aggressive word, but that was still fresh in your mind from the startup around building the teams.
Absolutely. I hate failure. And so I just needed to get that taste of failure out of my mouth.
And that short memory kind of helps.
Yeah, it certainly helps. Yeah. I purged the E word out of my mouth, entrepreneur. And I think it was kind of banned in my house, but
because of the struggle?
Because of the struggle, like so much so that I didn't even, and I still haven't been engaged in any of the startup scene here at all. I just, I'm focused on literacy, but like I know it really well, but I haven't touched it.
Yet?
I haven't touched it. We have a lot of work to do in literacy.
No. I mean, I think I appreciate you sharing. I think at least, that's good. Like for me, it was always sports, right? And so if we always had a mantra of like next play, and so whether you as played linebacker, but like made a great play, that's great, but like the next play always comes up next no matter what.
Right.
Whether you sack and get the ball back and give it to the offense, or you get burned and embarrassed in front of all your friends and family, like there's still the next play.
Right.
But that short memory was good practice for me, I think, in school and playing sports, because if not with that professionally, knowing how hard it is teaching or like running the shop we're running now, you get a lot of wins in a day, a lot of losses in a day, and if you don't have kind of that short memory to get back up, it can cripple some people.
Yeah, I think I've been blessed with a very short memory.
Yeah, it's important. So Read Charlotte, we've like talked about a little bit, but tell for the folks that don't know, kind of give us a summary of what Read Charlotte is and what you guys have been working so hard on the past few years.
Yeah, so Read Charlotte is a community initiative. The goal is to double third grade reading proficiency to 80% by 2025. Sometimes people refer to us as a program, but we're not.
Right.
We have lots of programs in our community, and the folks that put us together, I think in their wisdom, realized that what we needed was, some people call us an air traffic controller or a harbor master, but really an entity that could help everyone figure out which direction was north and then help move everyone in that direction.
Right.
So we are designed as a 10-year initiative, so we're supposed to sunset in 2025.
Yep.
And there's this African proverb: if you want to go fast, go. If you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And so we want to go very far. And so a lot of our work is really about how do we bring folks together,
right,
which means sometimes you need to slow down so that other people can speed up and catch up with you. And I think a lot of what we've done is help take very esoteric and hard to access research and data and make it easy to understand and actionable for lots of folks around the community. So, I mean, nonprofits, faith-based partners, funders, and, I was thinking today how we're really starting to see a sea change in groups using data and looking at research to understand, like, are we moving the needle? Which needles do we need to move?
Yep.
It's really remarkable to see that change, that's been happening over the past several years among partners in the community.
And what is that a big focus of what's working so far? Like, what else over the first 5 years would you say are like pretty big wins?
I think so. When we think about systems, they're really a three parts. So one is like the connections between people and organizations. The second are, the practices and program models we're using, how effective those are, what's the evidence for it. And then third is the quality of implementation. And then are we focusing on continuous improvement? And so if you want to both see the system, you got to look at all three. And then if you want to change the system, you got to make some informed decisions about, like, where am I nudging? We see much more coordination happening among groups and all different kind of groups that are happening in some pretty profound ways. We see greater use of evidence-informed, evidence-based practices and program models. And then we're seeing stronger implementation. And I think one area that we are...
It's one of our favorite words in our organization.
Implementation.
Yeah.
I like execution.
Yeah.
This term, but, I'll use implementation to sound like a nonprofit. But then the other one we're really big on in our team is improvement science, so continuous improvement. We invest in our staff capacity in that area. But as we think about the work ahead of us, it's the big thing on my mind is spreading and scaling. So how do you spread and scale what works?
Right.
And that's all about systems barriers and challenges.
I was just hearkening back, one of our first interviews, Dr. Howard Fuller was talking about how he's come to his work, but also through systems change, and thinking now how important that is at the same time, but what he's doing now in his career is thinking from a systems change to a rescue mission and saying it still needs to happen. And he's been at that level, at a systems level, right? But now teaching and working directly with kids and saying that always kind of having that consistent balance in his head about, do I need to be here or here? And like, how do I do both? And I think given you guys like not running programs, but always interesting to have a leader and a visionary like that think about just how he's balancing systems level versus rescue mission of saving kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I tell people sometimes that we are in the wholesale business. We're not in the retail business. So I think when Reed Charlotte's working at its best, you don't even know that we are like there, right? We're like way in the background.
The invisible hand.
We're the invisible hand.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. So a lot of what I do is like working with adults and thinking about, again, execution and how do we get better. I mean, if I'm not reading books about literacy, I'm reading business books, right, to figure out how to execute better. And so we're largely in a wholesale business. Sometimes groups will ask us, will we come and table and what have you, and we'll do that occasionally, but I would much prefer getting the collateral or whatever it is into the hands of groups that are directly serving families rather than us, because really we're literally trying to work ourselves out of a job so that we're no longer needed. And
so challenges, another not many, but day to day, Reed Charlotte doubling third grade literacy in a county in a city as big as Charlotte and Mecklenburg. What are challenges that you're thinking about day to day?
Well, I think the biggest challenges that I think about are increasingly systems challenges, right? How do we not let adult issues get in the way of what's best for children and families? And
what type of adult issues?
I mean, it's the usual stuff. I think if you think back to high school, that's a pretty good frame. So just think about all the stuff that happened in high school. I think that book, like Everything I Need to Know, I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, had it off by a few years. It's really high school, right? Think back to high school and just bigger stakes.
And so in my head, I'm hearing like cliques. I'm hearing who's going to prom with who, jobs, cars. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. And I was the nerd in high school. So that still hasn't changed.
Right.
So.
And so speak more on that specifically, or just some of the challenges, just like kind of aligning those adults to make sure, whether it's that specifically or to the execution of what you're saying with reading programs, after school programs, summer school programs, a little bit of all of it.
Right. Yeah. I think some of the disappointments I've had in the last couple of years. So one of the things we have is like a network of school partner, school community partnership that we call Transformation Network. And we were trying to solve the problem of one, lots of groups working with schools, but not necessarily looking at like what's happening with literacy, much less knowing, okay, what do we do to improve? Sometimes you have multiple groups and both partnering with a school, but not knowing each other.
Yep.
And then the other challenge is you got schools that don't have enough community partners, right? Sure. And I remember when we were starting this work about a year and a half ago, and we were just getting ready to launch in August 2018, the first year of the Transformation Network, and we had a pretty sizable church back out on us, like at the last minute. And I was begging them, like, just come to the meeting. Don't pull out. I had surrogates calling them and like nothing. And we never did get things going with that school. And I had to like basically, go to the principal and apologize that we couldn't get it done. And
did you ever figure out why they backed out?
There's an answer they gave, but I don't really think I know the real answer. It didn't ring true to me.
Sure.
But I think it's one of those things where, there's a different level of engagement that's needed to like show up every week as a tutor or to help put on family events, as or to help, build kids' home libraries. And, the other things are needed. So like the backpacks and the, breakfasts and donuts for teachers and things like that. Right. Those are important. But to move the needle on literacy, there's like a different level of engagement that's needed. And, that just takes work. And, just like in any sort of business development, customer acquisition work, I mean, you got a pipeline you're working through, and it takes a lot of work to get, groups that really want to step up to that level of commitment.
For nothing else, at least with the Transformation Network, we got to shout out Mark Dickman, who, we always have the pleasure of working with at Ashley Park, and we're biased, but I think he's doing a good job with what you're describing.
Yeah, Mark's a great guy. It's a rare example, actually, of being pulled into a community. Yeah. In fact, I can think it might be about the only example. I can think of maybe one or two other churches or groups that have pulled us into their community. But Mark definitely was the first. Yeah. And the work that they're doing over on Freedom Drive, it was fairly unusual to have a group say, hey, will you please come and work with our community?
Awesome. So Reed Charlotte recently began an initiative focused on families. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so back in 2016, we did like a massive amount of research, probably over 1,200 hours, just reading tons of journal articles, stuff that make a lot of people go to sleep. But
good bedtime reading.
Yeah, good bedtime reading if you got insomnia. So one of the things that was pretty clear in the research was that engaging families was important, but yet nobody had any clear ideas about how to do it. In fact, I remember going to my board that summer, 2016, and said, okay, we found these 5 big levers that research tells us move the needle. One of them, families, it's important, but I don't know how to do it. Yeah. Because there was no clear, okay, do this. And, we look for things like effect sizes and want to see like rigorous evidence, and I just couldn't find any. And they said, well, we understand. Why don't you leave it, and maybe you'll figure out what to do in that bucket. And I think what we wanted to avoid was just check the box stuff. Yeah. You can do that very easily, right? But
donuts with dad's not enough.
I think you got to really pay attention to like what kids need, and then what are the adult behaviors that are actually going to drive the needle, and then what can you do that's actually going to help align with that. That's the hard stuff, and it's not easy work. If it was, it would have been done already. We would just be, copying something that's there. So we're really committed to trying to understand families. I tend to think about them as customers, and I think they have options. So, we're competing with Bank of America and Coca-Cola and Gillette and all sorts of other groups that have messages, and our message is, and what we're selling is literacy. So we've got to make it as compelling and easy to use for families, and really try to understand them as customers. And so one of the things I've been trying to do for the last year and a half is like look for really good market data about families. And just one thing to highlight, so the majority of babies right now born to millennial parents, right? And we know in so many other
Majority,
places.
currently, I guess,
Yes.
probably across the country.
Right,
Yep.
right.
Wow.
It's been like that for some years now. And so there's been a lot of work that's been done, right, on the habit or preferences and habits of millennials and purchasing habits and things like that. And I think a lot of what you're seeing like changing like in the market around like food purchases and things like that are just kind of like being driven by that. Look at United Ways, not just ours, but across the country,
Other
really
models
being
adapting.
impacted by differences in how do we give.
Sure.
Well, we've been trying to find similar kinds of research on millennials as parents. I found just a little thin bit, but what I found suggests is that the preferences are different, that you can't just slice millennial parents up by social economics and think that you understand them, because it doesn't work quite that way. And part of what really concerns us is if you think about a lot of the parent focus, family focus programs, they were developed years ago, right? For another cohort of families that probably had different preferences and tastes and ideas about parenting. And we really need to understand our parents today as customers. So just think about in any other, format that I'm going to sell you. Look at Kraft Heinz, which is struggling. That's a Berkshire Hathaway partially owned company, right? Kraft Heinz, they're struggling, right? In part because consumer tastes and preferences are changing.
Sure.
Right. Well, we have that same challenge in our space, but unfortunately, we don't have the market signals. Right.
Right.
And so, if you're a group like ours that's like really interested in, are you really moving parent behavior in ways that the research tells us help kids move their, improve their emergent literacy skills, then you want to pay a lot of attention to your parents as customers and make sure that whatever you're designing is well matched to like the way they see the world and the way they want to interact with resources and things like that. So I'm not entirely satisfied at all with where we're at, but we're trying to learn how do we get there and how do we do things that actually help families in some very targeted ways. That's not just check the box, we engage families and we're moving on.
Yep. Well, I think, but just highlighting the importance of collecting that data and the sensitivity of the data. You're trying to compare like buying a Coke or buying a ketchup bottle that you can run from the grocery store or somewhere else. The type of data your team and organization is trying to connect or collect and then respond to a bit more challenging than a consumer good. Yeah,
it is challenging. Although, we recently had some folks here in town. We were hosting for a day and a half from San Antonio. And there's a foundation that's connected with a big grocery store chain down in Texas. And they were telling me about like this customer insights division they have, which I just want to go down there and get them to ask a lot of questions about literacy, because they care about literacy in this grocery store chain. And I'm just convinced. Like I tried a year and a half ago. Like I tried to get Facebook to help me because I was like, who has a ton of data
all
about
the data?
Facebook.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah.
I got as far as Zuckerberg's assistant.
Right.
I got that far. And then the door shut.
Even with CZI right now?
Farther than I thought you'd go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was persistent and then struck out, but I got that close.
True. What type of data would you want from families? Knowing like selling literacy, but changing behavior. In an ideal world, what type of data?
So what I would love to do is both in an online and offline world, understand who my early adopters are. And what I can tell you from what I've found so far, it does not cut the way that you think it would. You can't tell by education, by race, by income. I've got enough that tells me that those normal markers don't really follow. But I think it's things like how you feel about technology, how do you feel about family time, how you prioritize your kids versus yourself, how you think about childcare, right? There are some really clear differences that I've seen from some research on actually a book called Marketing Millennials, and Millennials is new parents that give me some indication that there are some different ways to think about conceptualizing parents as customers. There's a group out of Kansas City that actually has done some work on this, and I tried a year and a half ago to see if I could get them to work with me, but I struck out there as well. They surveyed.
Short memory.
Yeah, short memory. I got to keep going. So maybe someone out there is listening and will call me up at Reed Charlotte and say, hey, I can help you out.
Do you like millennials?
I like millennials. Yeah, I got plenty in my office. They're great people.
Good team building right there. Good
Absolutely.
team building. So kind of wrapping up from Reed Charlotte, what else do you want people to know about Reed Charlotte? What can they do to support you either some of the data that you guys are hoping to collect from millennial families, or just support the mission to ensure that 80% of kids are reading on grade level?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things it can do. So one, if you got a child in your life, a young child, 0 to 8, taking the time to read with him or her. I think reading children's picture books is one of the most powerful things you can do. We've got resources on our site that can help you do what we call active reading. So doing the ABCs, asking questions, building vocabulary, connecting text to kids' world. And that's one of the most powerful things you can do for kids. If you've got a child that's not yet in school, making sure they know their ABCs, how to write their name, and knowing their letter sounds are 3 of the strongest predictors of reading in kindergarten and first grade. And knowing how to write their name, not read their name. Actually knowing how to write your name is like 4 or 5 times more powerful a predictor. But those things are important. And then if you've got time, be a tutor. Come to readcharlotte.org and you can see ways you can get involved. And then, if you can write a check, help buy some books for kids. I go to promisingpages.org.
Yep.
Great
They're
organization.
Great. We partner with them. Yep.
And, help them get books into the hands of kids.
If we zoomed out at a macro level, what's the most innovative thing you're seeing in the social impact space?
So I'm a literacy head. So the coolest thing that I'm seeing right now that I think is around the corner is using technology not to disrupt education in the way that a lot of people were thinking, but to use it more like driver assist for teachers.
Tell us more.
Yeah, so there's this really interesting, I don't even want to call it intervention because that's not the right word, but it's like driver assist for teachers. That's like using technology to tell you exactly what your kids need, what skills to work on, how to deliver it, whether it's like teacher manage or child manage, how many minutes per day.
We're talking like virtual reality?
No. This is real.
Okay.
Like it's research I've been tracking for like over 3 years.
Wow.
And now it's starting to roll out into schools, but it's kind of like precision medicine for literacy. And I've also seen research that it works for math. So the thing I've been thinking about, the best analogy, so there's a lot of focus on self-driving cars, right? But what if the innovation that impacts most of us in our lifetime is just driver assist? Tells you what your blind spots are, tells you if something's behind you, right?
Certainly helped me.
Right? Well, yeah, it would help me. My wife has a 2019 CRV that has all that, and I have a dumb 2011 Nissan Altima. So I like backed into the parking garage wall the other week, but it's a great example, right? And so if you think a lot of what we're asking teachers to do, right? So the last 20 years has been like a lot of focus on data, right? Think about since No Child Left Behind. So, but there's this, as someone said to me, this Grand Canyon between looking at student data and knowing what materials and strategies to use. Technology can solve that for us, right? And I think that's the innovation that's coming, and particularly the ability of technology to help teachers like just be precise about exactly what kids need to be able to do, and to actually save them a lot of time. Someone told me recently that teachers on average spend about 12 hours a week prepping, right? What if you can reduce that time using technology and then let them spend more of that time on instruction? I think that's the around the curve kind of innovation that's coming that I'm personally really excited about.
Is that on the ground in Charlotte or anywhere close?
It's not on the ground in Charlotte. There are some places that's on the ground in the country, and I'm going to be visiting them later this spring, but desperately trying to figure out how to get this into North Carolina.
That's great.
Cool.
Keep us posted.
Will do.
A few more, and then we'll get you out of here. Kind of already talked about it, but maybe outside of Read Charlotte, what's one actionable thing you think people can do to dramatically improve public education?
I think get involved. I'm going to say do something that I don't do because I just don't have enough time, but I've been thinking recently about going to more of the Board of Education meetings and like being aware and being involved in what's happening. We're all shareholders, right? And whether you have a child in the system or not, you pay taxes. And
$1.8 billion a year organization, right?
Huge.
At least in Charlotte.
It's huge, right? And we all have a stake in it. And so, I think, being involved, talking with your elected officials, understanding what's happening, I think is really, really important. I think the work that various organizations and people do to try to support local schools is important, and that should continue. But I think also paying attention and understanding, kind of the business operations of the district is also really important. We all have a very strong vested interest in a strong public school system.
That's great.
ED of Read Charlotte, I feel like we should ask you what you're reading.
Oh, so I just finished recently a great book by Adam Grant called Originals, How Nonconformists Move the World.
It's a good one.
And I'm going to read it again. I'm actually going to have my whole team read it at our next quarterly retreat. I felt like that book got me down by 70%.
Got you down by 70%?
No. I mean, it got me. It was describing me.
Oh, got you.
Yeah, I wasn't. No, I was uplifted. No, they got me perfectly.
Weird one to choose for team building.
No. No, it was great. It was great. I mean, it was just amazing. I really, really enjoyed it.
And how do you see you and the team might use that to guide your work?
Execution. Okay. It's all about execution. So, I was thinking there's one tip in there that he gave. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I used it.
Cliffhanger.
I used it and it works like a charm.
Wow.
So it was like, thank you, Adam Grant. And then, but there was one piece of advice he talked about, sometimes you just wait for the right time to act. And I felt like he described our thinking to a T. So back to baseball, one of the things Warren Buffett talks about is Ted Williams, right? Yep. And he's said one of the reasons that he was so successful a batter was he would wait for the right pitch, right? And so sometimes in this work you got to wait for the right pitch, and that can be hard to do, right?
Yeah, because what's the balance between waiting and then you hear the other maxim, right, of move fast and break things and learn and don't be paralyzed by analysis. Where's the balance?
I guess for me, I think about these are kids.
Okay.
And so what we try to do is practice this notion of urgent patience. And, I don't want to experiment with our kids. I mean, these uncommon schools, refers to them as kids we love the most. Yep. And I don't want to experiment with our kids. I think about what we do as educational medicine. And, if a child was their stomach was hurting, you wouldn't just grab some, weeds or herbs from the side of the road and give it to them. But, unfortunately, in education, we do that kind of thing all the time. And I think we have, particularly for kids that really need us to do the right things, we need to be asking questions well, what's the evidence for this? Sure. How strong is it? For what outcomes?
How do we know?
Yeah. How do we know? And how confident are we, that we're going to see similar kind of results as in the studies? And so I think that kind of approach is what we need to bring to our work, and it's what we try to do every day at Read Charlotte.
That's great. Well, I think selfishly too, from some of our work, just thinking about families, and then if somebody just says something about a family or a mass amount of families, and when you just would ask, how do you know, or what data do we have to ensure that?
Right.
And not even being smart asses, but just general questions to know how that data is being used. Sometimes those questions aren't always answered. Sometimes there's not data to understand what decisions are being made, both for families and I think in a lot of sectors within public education, which can often be scary.
I think you're right. And I think the tricky thing is, how do you ask that question in a way that you're building capacity?
Sure.
But it's not like you're talking down to people, you're being exclusive. How do you do that in an inclusive way? And I think a lot of folks have not everything that is known is written down. So this is the idea of dynamic knowledge, right? There's static knowledge was written down, you can share it, but a lot of what we need is dynamic knowledge. It's in the heads and lived experiences of people. Sure. So how do you pull that dynamic knowledge out and make it static so it can be spread and shared? But how do you do it in a rigorous way that can help people ask the kind of questions you're asking, because the stakes are too high for us just to, throw things, on the wall and see what sticks.
And do you think so almost harkening back to the high school example and the delivery of a question like that, is it that we all just need to assume the best of each other, that a question like that is for the greater good and not threatening somebody's job, or is that too idyllic of a state to assume we can get there?
Well, I'll go back to high school. So I was the nerd, right? And, so I was the
most enlightened one. You weren't the nerd, you're the most enlightened.
I was the kid raising his hand that the other people didn't like because he knew the answer to the question, right? And so how do you do that in a way that you're not a show off, right? And I mean this sincerely. So, sure. And, there are times that it is a challenge, right? Because you want to authentically, like we said, you want to bring everyone along. And it's not that we have all the answers. We absolutely do not.
Yep.
Right. But I think one of the challenges we have, particularly around families, is there's a lot of assumptions everywhere.
Sure.
I can always tell when I'm in a room, particularly for folks who haven't heard me talk before, and their questions are just dripping with all sorts of assumptions around families, right? And
negative assumptions.
Negative assumptions. So I'll give you the best one that I had recently. So I was talking with someone, and we're talking about some of the successes that have been happening with family literacy nights, right? And I mean, as you know, there are cases where you got like hundreds of families coming in. And so they said to me, yeah, so, but what do you do when you can't get families like interested? And I said, well, I just told you we have hundreds coming in. He said, yeah, but what do you do when, families don't care? And I was like, well, that might be an issue a year and a half ago, but we actually have multiple schools, so they're coming. And just wrapping your head around the idea that, yeah, there are families all across our community in all sorts of zip codes, look like all sorts of ways that care about their kids and that will show up right on an evening to come learn, like, how can I help my kid learn to read? And that is kind of counter narrative to what a lot of folks, the ideas are carrying around about our families. So how do you bring folks along? Because what I need for that person is actually be converted to say, holy moly, maybe the way I thought I understood the world is not exactly the way that it operates. And let me come along and see if we can learn together, and maybe there are things that I can do differently going forward.
Yeah, it's 100% right. I think we've been fortunate to see and collect some data where if we're thinking about how to get families, or any school thinking about how to get families out, there are some defaults in rooms we've been in, said student performances or musicals or sports. The surveys we've collected and others have collected as well, like you guys, oftentimes number one factor is I want more time with the teacher, or I want more academic resources. And so when you think about staying proximate to the families you're seeking to serve, they're not really asking for more basketball games or more dance recitals. The families in this particular example 10 times over asking for more academic resources and more time with teachers.
Yeah, the other thing you didn't say was food. Now, I understand food is a social lubricant. We use it all the time, but I remember getting into a quasi-argument with some folks from a church group 2 years ago. They were telling me, well, the only way we get them in is like, family sandwich with food.
Right.
And I said, well, college students are really motivated by food. You offer pizza and they're going to come. So I don't think it's just, we all like food, right? But I think it's these assumptions.
Would they say that in South Charlotte if there was an event?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, and that's an incredibly frustrating point. I think it fires us up too, because those types of things only come out in certain neighborhoods and certain situations with families that look a certain way, which is not fair, because humans at around 6 or 6:30 on evenings generally like to eat.
They generally like to eat.
And really disrespectful and racist to assume only certain types of people show up at 6 because of food.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? We did something really that was just eye-opening for me, and has stayed with me for the last 2.5 years. So I don't know if you've read the book Switch by Dan and Chip Heath, right? So there's this chapter early in the book when they're talking about going to rural Vietnam and trying to solve I think it was a child nutrition problem. And what they did was they observed that there was a small minority of kids that were healthy, right, relative to the other kids that were malnourished. And so the way they solved the problem was learning what those families were doing different than the other families, and then having those families share with others, right? So in the fall of 2017, we went to 5 high poverty schools, and we asked the principals to invite the families of 4th graders whose kids had scored at college and career ready on a 3rd grade intergrade reading and assessment, the EOG, in the spring, right? They were college and career ready, were 4 and 5.
On track,
Right, on track. And we just asked them, would you invite them, right? Now, we had found some research that kind of told us if families did certain things or kids did better in school. But we wanted to, talk to them. We had no idea what was going to come. The principals invited them. We didn't even touch with them. So they show up, they come with their kids. And it was pretty profound, because across all these schools, these families didn't look any different from any other family in those neighborhoods, but yet their kids were all reading at college and career ready, right? And I remember I was able to attend 5 of the 6 meetings, and was wishing all of Charlotte could be there, right? And it was just pretty profound. But I remember the very last session that we did at Sterling Elementary, and we had a Spanish group, and then we had an English speaking group, and I was in an English speaking group, and I mean, that group just represented what I was seeing in other schools. Like those families didn't fit any stereotype. We had a couple of mothers that had their kids as teenagers. We had like a grandmother raising their kid, but we also had a 2-parent family. We had a divorced family. I mean, they came in all shapes and sizes, but all their kids were reading College and Career Ready, right? And they didn't fit the stereotypes of what a lot of people think families need to do or be able to do. And it just, really left a profound effect on me because you have no idea what's going on with these families or kids or what they care about or their dreams and aspirations for their kids. And I think the safest thing you do is start with assuming the best and then act from there, right?
Yeah, that's great. A little bit of a good exit, but picking up from food and the most important question that we've asked you all day. What does square pizza remind you of?
Nonconformity.
Nonconformity.
Yes.
That's going to be in the top ranking. So why?
I think when we think about pizza, we typically think round, right?
Sure.
And so, I like the idea of questioning the predominant paradigm and, asking why not.
Yep.
I actually read a book, I think, several years ago called Why Not?
Can we start telling people that's why we named it Square Pizza?
That's why you named it Square Pizza. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sorry, what book?
I think it was called Why Not? And I forget the author's name, but I remember a couple interesting things. So like when you eat a bagel, turn it upside down, right? So the cream cheese is on your tongue because that's where all the flavor is. Or eating a banana, we typically peel from one side. I don't like bananas.
I peel it from the bottom.
Yeah, so you
Why?
peel it.
Why?
Because I think monkeys do that or
That's
something.
what monkeys do. That's right.
Oh, best practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's best practice. They know what they're doing. They're pros at it. But so just this idea of like looking at the world differently, right? And back to Adam Grant's the subtitle of his book, Originals, right? How nonconformists move the world.
Yep.
And so,
Good connection.
The best way to get to mediocrity is doing what everybody else is doing. So there might be some things in there that are good, but don't be afraid to change the world and to make your pizza square. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
having me.
Thanks.
Hey guys, this is Greg. Thanks again for checking out the podcast episode. Feel free to show us some love on social media at SchermCo, SCHERMCO, and hashtag Square Pizza Pod. Stay in touch for the next episode.